Hello, Rebels. Welcome to the base. Steve Hilton here, joined today by Kristen Garcia-Dumont. And in a moment, we'll be joined by one of the leading candidates in the recall election. It's going to be a great conversation. Make sure you don't miss any of the great conversations we have here at California Rebel Base. Subscribe, please, at Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a review. It really helps us get the word out. It's a crucial time. The recall is just days away now. And we need everyone's help to get the word out about the conversations we're having here and the changes we want to make to this great state. So without further ado, let's bring in our guest today. He's Kevin Faulconer. You know him. Previously mayor of San Diego, one of the leading candidates in the recall election, and it's wonderful to have you with us, Kevin. I just want to start by asking you not to really, we go over the arguments about why the recall should happen. The first question, very, very frequently on this show. I don't think we need to rehearse that right now. Of course, we'll get into some of those arguments. But what I'm really interested in to hear you lay out for our audience is, why you? Why should it be you on the second question in terms of who should replace Gavin Newsom?
Well, Steve, thank you. It's great to be with you and Kristen. And I'll tell you, I have the experience and the tenacity to get results on some of the issues that, Californians care about the most. And, as somebody who got elected in a deep blue city, in a deep blue state, but knows how to stand up for the courage of his convictions. And what we were able to do in San Diego is the type of approach I'm going to take as governor, very directly. We were the only big city in California where we actually reduced homelessness. I did not allow 10 encampments on the sidewalks in San Diego. And as I'm sure everybody who looks to see what's happening with the explosion of homelessness all across California cities, they know that not only has Newsom has failed, but you need somebody who has the political will to actually stand up and make a difference. So, I have the experience, the solutions, and I think probably most importantly, Steve, the results. And somebody who can do that, by the way, certainly with a majority legislature in California that's a Democrat, but I'm a big believer that if you can go out and win the argument publicly, then you can win the vote. That's what I've had to do my entire career.
I got to ask you about, go ahead, Steve.
Go on, Kristen. No, you go.
My issue, schools and masks. Right. I think I know that you're not going to require masks in schools. I think that's pretty consistent among the candidates. But, for example, you've got the Department of Education, who's now doing a civil rights investigation into 5 states. Right. I mean, so what do you think about that? How are you going to stand up against the federal government that's apparently going to take away funds from schools if they allow parents to have choice?
Well, you hit the nail on the head. It's all about allowing parents to have that choice. And yes, I've been very vocal about that. And I've been very vocal about this whole issue of schools. And to take an approach that says it's going to be a California approach and not what we've seen from Gavin Newsom, which is a one size, dictator approach. Everybody has to do the same thing. It doesn't work. You are not going to mandate your way out of COVID-19. I mean, that's just the facts. And so, and I say this just, not as a candidate for governor, but as a dad who had 2 kids in public schools. My daughter just graduated from high school. She should have been in the classroom this entire second semester.
Yeah, exactly.
But because Gavin Newsom, listens to the teachers union, he didn't do what was right for our kids and for our parents. And I'll tell you guys, I actually kicked off my campaign in Los Angeles, and I did it in front of a closed public school.
Yeah.
And I picked that location because right across the street was an open private school, same grade level. That school, teachers were safely teaching, kids were safely learning. Why? Because that school reports to parents. But yet the public school that I was in front of, which ultimately reports to Gavin Newsom, was closed. That's what I'm talking about, which is a leader who's going to stand up and do the right thing for our parents and our kids, and not the dogma that we've seen from Gavin Newsom and again, a one-size-fits-only approach.
And what do you think, Kevin, I completely agree with that. And I really appreciate how strongly you and forcefully you made that point. Where are you on the on the, if you like, the next level of that. So you've made clear that as the leader of the state, you will bring common sense, a common sense attitude to these questions in terms of how you therefore, in the executive branch, run the school system. And so much of it, as we know, is run from Sacramento. Yeah. Where are you on the next level of power to parents, as it were, which is the real choice, the very aggressive choice strategy that you'll find in these ballot measures that are now in motion? For example, what do you think about the idea of actually taking all the money, all the state money, and putting it directly in parents' hands? Are you supportive of that ballot measure?
Oh, I will tell you, Steve, I'm a huge supporter of giving parents the choice. More charter schools is the future in California. You have to give parental choice when it comes to education, and the dollars have to flow with it. Because if you don't, then you're not actually making the changes and the results that we need. You're never going to get the competition in our public schools that I think Californians should demand. Because look, our charter schools are working. And we know that even before this pandemic, our schools were failing in California. 49th out of 50, the most innovative state in the nation. And yet, the governor and the legislature just allows this to continue year after year. If you want to keep doing the same thing, stick with the status quo and Gavin Newsom. If you actually want change and to get parents the help, the support, and the money that goes with it, we have to support that.
It's interesting. A lot of people I talk to just say, why? Kristen, you have such a negative view on the governor, as if he's doing these things intentionally. He doesn't want to hurt kids. He doesn't want to close schools. He's just trying to appropriately respond to COVID. And I think people fail to see the connection between the money he's getting from these special interests in the unions and then the policies that he implements. But, what do you say to that? Maybe I mistake it.
Well, you're right. And look, he's botched the basics. He's in over his head. And he makes these decisions, again, that are not based in reality. And the fact, again, that, our schools in California were the last to open in the country. How far did that put our kids behind, not just in the learning curve, of which we're seeing more and more evidence of that, but in the social, mental health aspects of it as well? That's real, guys. And
this data, there was a study, wasn't there, not long ago? I think McKinsey published it, and the worst hit, the data is very clear on it, were the exact people that the Democrats claim to speak for. So black kids, Latino kids, they're the worst hit by what they've just done.
Steve, that is absolutely correct, and particularly hardest hit some of our largest school districts in Los Angeles. And so again, if you're going to have a governor that's going to follow that dogma, the real folks that are getting hurt are our kids. And again, if we want to keep doing things the same way, you can support Gavin Newsom, right? But the reason that 2 million Californians signed this recall petition, and oh, by the way, it's Democrats, it's independents, and it's Republicans, is they all want a change at the top. And so, look, we've got to put our kids first, not Gavin Newsom's special interest.
So let's talk about a couple. I just wanted to get you on a couple of other issues, if I may, because I know we don't have too much time with you today. And I just want to get you on two issues where we had Larry Elder on the podcast. I'm going to ask you about him in a minute, but just on the issues first. On the other big ones that people are talking about right now, obviously the wildfires and homelessness, which you also mentioned. On both of those, we asked Larry Elder, what are you going to do about it? And he said, and his response was an emergency. I'm going to declare a statewide emergency on wildfires and on homelessness. What do you make of that? And what would your response be on those two big issues?
Yeah, I have a lot of experience, again, back on homelessness, which is, one of the, if not the top issue in California. Again, we took dramatic action in San Diego. I completely changed what we were doing. So I said I did not allow tent encampments on the sidewalk. Why? Because we actually care about people. We care about people enough not to let them live and die in a tent in our public spaces, our freeway underpasses, overpasses, our parks. I made a significant change and difference. I created a shelter system, and the biggest thing that I did differently than any of my other colleagues as mayors is in California, I enforced the law. I've said every human being deserves a place to go, a place to shelter. But when we provide that, you have an obligation to use it. And so as people saw the change in San Diego, as they saw the tents coming down, as they knew that we were serious about helping people, number one, and enforcing our quality of life, number two, we saw those numbers come down. We saw people get help. We saw business owners supporting what we were doing. We saw folks, in houses, because look, nobody, has the right to put up a tent in front of your house or in front of your business, use heroin and methamphetamine and think it's okay. Again, we took pretty dramatic action, and the only city in California where we not just reduced homelessness, but we reduced it by double digits. And so I'm going to take that exact same approach as governor, lead by example, and follow that same mantra of everybody has a right to shelter, but I will insist on an obligation to use it. And what we've seen on wildfires is, Gavin Newsom has lied to the public about what he did in terms of, he went out there and said he treated all these acres, which they didn't. He actually cut CAL FIRE's budget by $100 million last year. I'm going to put our state on a war footing, very simply. We are going to, and I am going to, by executive order, change the regulations that allows us to go in and do the fuel reduction and the brush management that have been on the books. But this governor won't do it, guys, because he's a captive of the far left who doesn't want anything to be done in our forest lands. And we see the results of that. We've had the most devastating statewide fires again this year, and the governor hasn't done anything to change that dynamic. And if you want to talk about, the climate, look at all the tons of air pollution that has been putting into our California air because these fires are burning, because Gavin Newsom did not take the steps to actually thin the forest and do what we needed to do. So again, I believe that this is common sense. I believe that you actually have to take action. But again, Newsom won't do it because he won't allow himself to make any changes in the activists on homelessness, and the same thing on the environmental movement for our forests. And we see the result in California.
So look, I think that, that all makes a ton of sense. We've had experts on this show who've laid out the case there very powerfully. You've done it very powerfully on those issues, on education too. So I want to get a little bit to the politics now. Sitting there as someone, when you entered the race, in fact, I think when you first announced, you were talking about an exploratory campaign before the recall campaign really got going. You were talking about an exploratory campaign for the 2022 regularly scheduled governor's race, and you're going to be in that. And then here comes the recall, and then suddenly you're the guy with all the experience, the very practical plans. I think you've laid them out very clearly. And then along comes Larry Elder, almost from nowhere, and seems to be kind of, getting all the attention, and according to the polls, like way ahead of everyone else. Does that make you feel frustrated?
No. Look, what we're seeing in California is the vast majority of folks, even right now, because of this recall dynamics, haven't made up their mind yet. And I think one of the biggest reasons that we're getting traction across the state is because as folks get certainly to know me, get to know the aggressive steps that we took in San Diego, and somebody who can actually, build coalitions to win. And I think that's incredibly important because, again, in a deep blue state like California, you have to get Republican votes, you have to get independent votes. That's really the key, and even some percentage of Democrats. So I think one of the things that I offer, again, is somebody who has done it in our second largest city, and who's ready to step in on day one, because you have a very short turnaround time. And I know that we're going to be able to bring in a team of men and women who believe, like I do, on the need for serious reforms and change, because you're not just electing a governor. You have 4,000 appointments, all the agencies, all the bureaucracies. And so I am going to move very, very quickly to bring in key individuals and make a lot of the changes that we've just been talking about. This is no time, Steve, for on-the-job training for a governor.
Yeah, but don't people not want a politician anymore? People are so tired of politics as usual and rhinos and people who've, been in office but sort of accomplished nothing. That's obviously not your record. But, what do you say to people who say, enough with politicians? I don't care. I actually just want people who are smart and care about my family and care about my kids and care about me having a job and being able to buy a home, just basic, we want the American dream.
I think you're right. And I think I match up to all of those. And again, as somebody who can actually get results, somebody who does what's right and not what's politically correct. That's what I was known as mayor. And, I think back particularly to last summer. where I had hundreds of protesters out in front of my house, yelling at me, yelling at my family, my kids, every name of the book, screaming to defund the police. I didn't defund the police. I actually increased the police budget in San Diego. And I got that through a supermajority Democrat city council. Why? Because it was the right thing to do. And while we saw all these other cities in California go out and defund their police departments, I knew that if we want the best men and women who wear that badge, we better darn well give them the tools, the training, and the resources to be successful. And so I think that's what separates me. Again, somebody who not only has just the experience, but who can stand up and actually do what's right for the state. And it's been interesting, you know, as we've seen all of these other mayors in California, they all went out and they thought it was the politically correct thing to defund their police departments. And guess what they're all doing right now? They're all putting money back into the budget because we've seen crime, you know, rise to the highest in 13 years. Murders are up in California 30%. Californians want somebody who's going to take action and knows how to do it.
Yeah, look, I think you make a good case, Kevin. I know, I really do. You're very, you're being very polite. I can imagine that you would feel very frustrated. I got one more California question. I know you need to get back on the trail, and then something a bit broader. Just quickly on California, if the recall doesn't happen, are you in for 2022 to run against Newsom as for the governor?
Yeah, I think it is going to happen, Steve. And I'll tell you, we just came off a 2-week bus tour. I think the enthusiasm, the energy is off the charts on the yes side of this election. And again, I've seen it in all parts of the state. Democrats come up and say they're voting to recall Newsom. This governor's in real trouble. He knows it. He's spending, more money than we've ever seen. But, Steve, he can have all the ads that he wants of Elizabeth Warren. That's not going to save himself in California. So I think this is it. This next 2 weeks is when we're going to make that change.
So last question, I promise. I've got this feeling that even though there's no sort of direct connection, everything we're seeing going on at the national level, at the international level with Biden and the absolute catastrophe in Afghanistan, how he's handled that, I've got a feeling that could impact the recall in the following way, that people are just so frustrated that these politicians, to Kristen's point earlier, they make all these unbelievable mistakes. No one pays a price. There's no accountability. No one takes responsibility. And in the recall, certainly for California voters, finally there's an opportunity just to express their rage at what's going on. And so in a weird way, I think that it could have an impact. What do you think?
I do, and I think Kristen's right. And I've seen it, and you can really tell, particularly over the last several weeks. So I think it absolutely does, Steve. And what we've seen is failure on the national level, and certainly failure here in California with Gavin Newsom. People are done with the dysfunction. They want a governor who's going to come up, as I said, stand up, get the tents off the sidewalks, do the brush clearing in our forests that we need to, actually build reservoirs in California so we can get more water storage because we face drought after drought. But all we see is Gavin Newsom come out and say, take a shorter shower. So, look, I'm somebody who understands how important all of this is to our quality of life. And I'll tell you, I'm going to put, victims first and criminals in jail. And that's going to be a dramatic turnaround than what we've been seeing here in California.
Well, Kevin, great to talk to you. Really appreciate it. Good luck on the campaign trail. We said that to all the candidates. We're not endorsing anyone in particular, but we're really excited about the energy that you're bringing along with everyone else to this movement for change.
No, thank you for highlighting it. This is it. This next 2 weeks really is California's future. So it's been a pleasure. And folks want to learn more about me, they can go to kevinfaulconer.com. Thank you for the opportunity.
All right, Kristen, what do you make of that? He didn't really take the bait on Larry Elder.
Yeah, I thought that was actually interesting. I'm wondering if he's getting negative feedback on that, because he did come out swinging against Larry, including yesterday. He did a press conference. He had, a bunch of women. It kind of reminded me of the Binder of Women, but it was like a wall of white women behind him, all very upset about Larry Elder's comments on women. So he really went for the attack there. Might be a smart political move. Definitely leveraged Larry's popularity and Larry's name, and I saw a lot of press around him. But I thought it was actually nice and refreshing that today he's saying, look, this really is about Gavin. I think I'm the right one, but let's stay focused on Gavin. So that was good. But there definitely is some nasty attack ads going on.
Yeah, I mean, look, just reflecting on what we heard there, it was a classic performance of a very experienced and accomplished politician, I would say. I think, when he talks about what he did in San Diego with homelessness, that's real.
Yeah, and it's impressive.
And exactly, and everything he said makes sense. People say, oh, you can't do anything about the homeless, you can't. Well, he showed that's just not true, that actually he did put this requirement in, so it's all impressive. Everything he said, I kind of agree with.
Yeah.
But there's something to your point, isn't there, about that sense of, I don't know, people want something different because of the politician thing. It's interesting.
Yeah, I think people are just over it. It's
a real shame, actually. I mean, just to be honest,
because he's very impressive. And he's one of the candidates who's actually been very specific about the policies and what he would do. Everybody else has these sort of platitudes, and he's the only one who really has double-clicked and triple-clicked and said, here's specifically what I would do, and here's what I've done, and here's what worked, and here's what didn't. And, that's a ton of great information for voters, but you're right, there's a little bit of, he's been around a long time in politics, he's a politician, can't be trusted, and I really don't think Gavin helped him in that regard, and I don't think Biden's helping in that regard. People are sort of done being duped.
That's exactly, it's in a way really unfair, isn't it? Because you've got these machine politicians like that we're suddenly all over us, right? You've got at the national level, you've got Biden and Harris, absolutely classic machine politicians. They've basically done nothing else. They don't really have any principles or beliefs or whatever. They just go wherever the power is. That's why they completely fall apart when there's a crisis, because there's no sort of bedrock of belief. You absolutely see that with Gavin here. I mean, look at the way that he, prior to, in previous years, in his book, I think, was it sort of citizen, he like going on about how he, wants to put power in people's hands and school choice and charter schools. Then the minute he runs for governor to get the money from the unions, he wants to shut down every charter school, and people can just see through that. And so I think he's in a very unfair way, actually. Someone like Kevin Faulconer, who does have a positive record, is got but he is a politician. He's sort of tainted by all that, and it's even the way he speaks so well and clearly is very unfair, but it does come across. I don't know. It's an interesting phenomenon.
It really is, and it really is too bad, because he's very specific about his plan and what he would do to address the legislature and so on. And he is being, I think, unfairly tarnished as just your average politician. But it sort of is what it is. What's interesting about this is the California race is getting such national attention because I think people really are seeing it as a harbinger of things to come for all politicians, right? We're getting the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, out, the school board out, right? The recall efforts are really the citizens taking back power and saying enough of this nonsense.
As you say, exactly. You've got all the crime. We've got Gascon in LA. But it's interesting, just to come back to the choices here. I mean, it's interesting. It's almost like Elizabeth Warren with her endless sort of plans, right? She has a plan for this and a plan for that. Like in the end, it was a bit off-putting.
Well, there's a likability factor, and Gavin has actually had that for a very long time, right? People really liked him. I don't know that people really understood what he stood for, actually, because he just said whatever he thought he was supposed to say based on who was giving him money. But he used to have this kind of likability factor. There was a recent interview of him just in the past few days, and he's bemoaning this, right? He said,
"Oh my God, that interview was unbelievable.
It was crazy. People have to read it."
I was reading it in the car with and I just started reading bits of it out to my wife. I was just like, "Can you believe he's talking like this?
He's such a victim,
whining. Exactly. So, I used to be the lucky one, and now my
whole damn thing turned on me."
That's right. Exactly. Yeah. What is your problem? You're whining about the fact that it was absolutely infuriating.
When I was a lawyer, we used to coach the baby lawyers jokingly about this thing called the passive voice, right? So they'd come in, they go, "The deadline was missed." It's like, no, you screwed up and you screwed the client and you need to take accountability. And it reminded me of that. It was like, and it all got flipped. Like it has nothing to do with him and his absolute failures.
You're
It happened to Lucky Gavin. It was so odious. He doesn't even get it that he comes off as an entitled idiot.
And do you remember the other part of it that was just stunning was it right at the end where the reporter mentioned that Gavin was now had to leave because he was driving from San Francisco to LA, driving so that he could meet people. And then Gavin says something like, "Oh, it's amazing. All these years I've been flying around the state, but actually it's really amazing when you sort of drive around and see state." What are you talking about? You're the governor of this whole state, not just San Francisco and LA, and he's suddenly deciding to drive. I just thought it was so astonishingly tone deaf.
Totally. There are people who actually drive in cars and live in these places that I normally just fly over and never see. Again, with the arrogance, arrogant, entitled.
But also so stupid, like to not, it's a bit, to sort of say that out loud, even if you think it, okay? Even if you're so patronizing that that's what you think, to say it to a reporter 2 weeks before an election where you're being recalled, in part because of these kinds of attitudes, it's just so unbelievably stupid.
I know, but this is who he's always been. He's just having to reveal it now that he's in crisis. He can't believe that it's this close. He's still in he's 2 months behind. He's in a state of disbelief.
I know.
That he is being rejected because he failed. And there are specific failures that everybody can point to. Yeah. And then to come off like this entitled person. I mean, it really wasn't until recently that I remembered he's always had a silver spoon. Like I'd forgotten that about Gavin, right? He's been in bed with the Gettys from day one. His daddy got him the job.
I was going to make a joke there, but I'm not.
You should. It's a podcast. We can do that here.
I still think, no, it's still public. I'm not going to do it.
But he really has had absolutely everything handed to him. He has never known a bit of difficulty, zero gravel on that guy's path. And here he finally has a little bit of adversity. And look what he does. Instead of standing tall and fighting and really truly being a representative, he curls up in a ball and whines and complains that it's all our fault. Oh, we're doing this to him. You arrogant piece of you-know-what.
Exactly.
It's so disgusting. So he deserves to get thrown out.
I think we've made that clear. And then the other thing I just wanted to reflect, just to sort of wrap it up for today, was just thinking about Kevin Faulconer, who we just heard. And then think about the other people the other candidates we've had on. We've still got a couple more to come. And we may see a couple of them again as well. But we've had Larry Elder, obviously, on the show, who was great, and Kevin Kiley a couple of times. Just those three. Look at I mean, I thought Larry was actually very, very, for someone who's not, he's, as he said, he's been a politician for a few weeks. Very clear, very, very measured in what he was saying, very, came off as someone who really, was on top of it and wasn't just some sort of gadfly that just sort of, zoomed into this election. Very impressive. Kevin Kiley, incredibly impressive. He's been there fighting, doing great stuff in the assembly. And it just makes me think, just those three, right? Actually really impressive Republican leaders. Very different, each of them. And you just think, actually, why have we been so supine and passive in this state and just said, oh, it's such a blue state. Oh, they're going to be in power, one party rule. No, we've got like so many great people, actually, who are fighting and are ready to fight. And this recall sort of brought out that energy. And I think it's great. Whatever happens, literally whatever happens, it's giving me a lot of hope that over the years, we can really make a change.
Yeah, it's, people don't like to be on a losing team. And so I think as Californians, we just felt so defeated for so long, like just some nameless, faceless people we don't really know, elect these people that we don't agree with. And I think, really did start small. People in San Francisco starting to go after Chesa Boudin and saying this out of control crime can't stand, going after, these boards, these small school boards saying you don't represent us. And a reminder that these people are supposed to represent our interests. And once it got momentum, and I do have to give us a little bit of credit, having shows like this that people can listen to and say, okay. It's
all thanks to us.
The recall, we did it. But people don't feel alone. People don't want to feel alone. They want to feel part of a movement, and the energy is great here.
Exactly. And I just think that the word that, funnily enough, it just really captures why I, wanted to call the show, what I called it. When I was first thinking about it, my show on Fox is called The Next Revolution. That kind of idea of a people-driven populist revolution is something very close to my heart. I was thinking, well, that's what we need in California. That's how I got to California Rebel Base, all the rebels who want to kind of overthrow this one-party rule. And it just feels so right. That just feels like what's going on now. And, who knows if it's going to actually happen this time in a couple of weeks with the government. But there's much, we got to keep pushing, because it's not just the governor's position, it's all these other elected positions. It's the assembly, the legislature, the DAs, or as you say. And so the revolution is just getting started, as are we on this show. That's why I'm so excited about it. We're at the start of something really big. All right, let's leave it there for today. To that point, you've got to help us with this revolution. California Rebel Base needs your support. It's a people-powered revolution. We need you to get involved, spread the word. So make sure you subscribe on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a review. A very positive review, we hope. And then that helps all these algorithms that the evil big tech people use to put. I shouldn't say they're evil, otherwise they won't help us get the word out. They're very wonderful big tech people who help us make this show possible. It really helps us get the word out. Make sure you subscribe and make sure you come back for the next episode of California Rebel Base.